Hi, I'm Kelly Lees, Education Officer for the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries and Tocal College. And I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about the Varroa mite response that's been going on since June. So as most of you would be aware, on the 22nd of June, Varroa mite was detected in the Sentinel hives at Newcastle Port. So fantastically, the Sentinel hives did their job and alerted us to the presence of Varroa in Australia. Now we've got the Sentinel hives in different ports around the place, and this is the job that they were put there to do, was to detect the mite if and when it made it to our shores. So on the 23rd of June I got a phone call that I had hoped never to receive from my boss, letting me know that Varroa mite had actually been detected and that I would be required to come and work at the incident management team and start working on the response that had been planned for a long time and how we would respond to an incursion if and when it occurred. So myself and my colleagues basically headed out to Maitland to what is known as the local command centre, where there were a number of DPI staff, and we set about working on how would we respond to the Varroa mite having made it to Newcastle. Basically, we spent a few days planning and implementing the response, and then primarily it was DPI staff in those first couple of weeks, and we spent a lot of time conducting surveillance around the original detection at the port. What we were doing was conducting ethanol washes on hives to identify what's known as an infected premises, or an IP. And what we did then is we went around and we started conducting surveillance on hives in those areas to identify those IPs so we could determine how far the mite had actually spread from that initial detection at the port. Once we'd started conducting that surveillance, a call out was then put out to other agencies and DPI staff to get involved in the response, as we needed to ramp up the response to conduct some more significant surveillance. A red zone was put in place, an eradication zone around those detections, the IPs, and then an additional 2 zones were also put in place, the purple zone and the yellow zone. Now they were surveillance zones. So initially a lot of surveillance was conducted in the red zone around those early infected premises, and then after that what happened was the response ramped up significantly, and we were then sent out into the yellow and the purple zones to conduct surveillance in those zones. At this stage there were a lot of people on board and a lot of volunteers as well, and we were sent out in crews to conduct ethanol washes on hives in the yellow and the purple zone. And the reason for this was so that we could delineate where the edge of the incursion actually was. So thousands of hives were actually ethanol washed, and we were looking for any detections further out. Lots and lots of crews working in the field, long days, conducting those surveillance activities, and all those results were brought back to the lab, and every single sample was tested for the presence or not of Varroa mite. And once a significant amount of surveillance had been conducted in the yellow and the purple, we were fairly confident that we'd actually found the edge of that zone. And then the response sort of switched a little bit, and we started to, we were still carrying on some surveillance, but then the focus switched to actually euthanizing the infected premises, which was done fairly quickly after they were identified. And then primarily the response switched to the destruction phase of the response. So within the eradication zone, the red zone, destruction commenced, and basically there was a systematic process involved with the destruction, and the idea was that we worked our way inwards essentially to eradicate the mite. Now this has never been attempted before around the world, and the beauty of the response happening here was that we actually had an advantage in that we'd learned from all the incursions around the world that had happened elsewhere. And we're pretty confident that we will be able to eradicate the mite, and we're working very hard to do that. We've had a lot of people come onto the response. I think the thing that's been amazing about the Varroa mite response is that we've had huge support from other agencies like Local Land Services, the Rural Fire Service, National Parks and Wildlife, ACT Parks, and others that have come in to assist with the response. It's a huge effort. We've had thousands of people on the ground conducting surveillance and eradication within all of the zones. I think it's really incredible that interagency cooperation that's happened. And the big one is that we could not be conducting this response without the volunteer beekeepers. So those beekeepers have come from every state of Australia, from as far away as Northern Territory, Western Australia and Tasmania. We have had commercial and recreational beekeepers from all states of Australia come and assist on the response. And we absolutely could not be conducting the response without the cooperation of all of those people who have volunteered their time to help us eradicate the Varroa mite in Australia. If we manage to do that, we will be the first country to eradicate the mite, and we are on track to do that. It's hard work. The work is difficult. It's long hours. The people that have come onto the response worked long days conducting surveillance, surveilling multiple sites in days, working in atrocious weather conditions from wind and heat to pouring down rain. We really haven't paused any of those activities for the weather. We have carried on because we do want to eradicate the mite. And so we are working really, really hard to get that done. And I, having been involved from the very beginning, have seen the cooperation of all of these people that have come in to assist, and we definitely couldn't do that without it. All of my colleagues at DPI have been working very, very hard in the response, and we understand how difficult this might be for some people. Most of us have bees, and we all love bees, and we understand that this Varroa mite response is very, very important to protect the broader beekeeping industry. So it's really, really important that we work hard and we work together to eradicate the mite. We are on track to do that. What's important now is that people that are outside the eradication zone, so beekeepers in the purple zone and what was formerly the yellow zone, which is now the blue zone, the general biosecurity zone, we are relying on people to continue to conduct surveillance for the mite so that any detections are caught early and we can move in and eradicate those detections before it spreads beyond the existing zones. So it's really important that if you have a beehive and you're outside that eradication zone, those red zones, that you do actually conduct some kind of exotic mite surveillance. You can do a sugar shake, which a lot of people prefer because it's non-lethal to the bees. You can also do an ethanol wash, which kills a small number of bees, which is very effective in detecting the mite. Or you can also do a drone uncapping, and given that we're moving into spring and summer, a lot of people are going to have drones in their hives now, and that is a great way to detect the mite. The mite actually prefers to be in drone brood, so uncapping a few drones will help you detect the mite on the pupae of those drones. So it's really important that you do conduct surveillance, that you carry on doing that. That will be of great assistance so that we can continue to control the incursion and make any detections early on so that the mite is controlled. The great thing about all of the detections that occurred in all the red zones around New South Wales is that they were all connected to the initial infection, and that means that they had been, those incursions had occurred because of beekeeper movements of hives. And so we were able to connect all of those cases back to the original eradication zone, which meant that when we did delineate the edge of the red, we were confident that it wasn't existing outside that except for those few sites that were connected to the initial infection. So again, that surveillance is really, really important. Carry on doing that so you can help us keep the mite under control. We really don't want to live with Varroa mite in Australia. We want to eradicate it. We want to keep the clean, chemical-free reputation of our honeybee industry and our honey for our overseas markets and for our domestic markets as well. It's really, really critical that we do this. On behalf of DPI, I would just like to extend my thanks to all the people who have contributed to the response, whether it was one day or whether it was 2 weeks. We really appreciate that you have come and given your time to this really, really important response. So thank you.